Get your hands off them now. Rowan Voslin's voice tore through the security feed, but the woman on the screen didn't flinch. She stayed there on her knees in the darkness of his daughter's bedroom, palms pressed against their closed eyes like she was stealing something he couldn't see. The timestamp glowed 2:47 a.m. His blind twins, Ellie and Elia, should have been sleeping in their beds at the Bismarck estate. Instead, they sat upright, perfectly still, while this woman's dark hands covered their faces, whispering something he couldn't hear through the audio. Something that looked like a prayer or a curse. Rowan's phone slipped from his grip, hit the marble floor of his office. Screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, but the video kept playing. Mabel Sterling, the caregiver he'd hired 2 weeks ago. The 10th one in 3 years. Her lips moved against Ellie's forehead. Then Elia's. Both girls tilted their heads up toward her touch. Like they were reaching for something. Like they could see her. But that was impossible. His daughters were blind. Born that way. Would die that way. 14 specialists from Mayo Clinic to Johns Hopkins had confirmed it over 4 years. Congenital bilateral optic nerve hypoplasia. The nerves never developed. No treatment. No hope. No miracles. Just expensive equipment and careful routines and the knowledge that his girls would never see his face or the North Dakota sky or their mother's photograph. Their mother, who died 3 years ago. Rowan's chest squeezed. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the image on the cracked screen. This woman, this stranger, was doing something to his daughters in the middle of the night. Something unauthorized. Something that looked wrong in every way that mattered. He should call security. Call the police. Storm down the hallway and throw her out of his house. But his legs wouldn't move. Because part of him, the part he'd buried with his wife, whispered a question he didn't want to hear. What if she knows something you don't? 3 years ago, Nadia Beaumont Voslin fell down the stairs of this house 6 months after giving birth to premature twins. The police called it an accident. A tragedy. Rowan held her cold hand in the hospital and promised her he'd take care of their daughters. That promise was the last true thing he remembered saying out loud. Everything after that was autopilot. Hiring staff. Installing cameras. Building walls between himself and anything that could hurt worse than he already hurt. The twins came home from the NICU blind. The doctors explained it in words that bounced off him like hail on pavement. Optic nerve hypoplasia. Permanent. Irreversible. They'd need lifelong care. Specialized education. Modified homes. Lives built around limitation. Rowan wrote the checks. Hired the therapists. Bought the equipment. Did everything money could do. But he stopped doing the one thing money couldn't buy. He stopped being present. Instead, he watched. Through 47 cameras installed in every room of the estate except the bathrooms. He watched his daughters eat breakfast. Watched them sit in their specialized chairs. Watched therapists work with them on orientation and mobility. Watched night nurses check on them every 2 hours. He watched everything. Controlled everything. And convinced himself that surveillance was the same as protection. 9 caregivers before Mabel. 9 failures that justified his paranoia. Caregiver number 1 lasted 3 weeks before quitting. Said watching blind children was too depressing. She couldn't handle the sadness. Rowan paid her severance and felt nothing. Caregiver number 2 spent more time on her phone than with his daughters. He caught her on camera scrolling through social media while Ellie cried in the background. Fired her the same day. Caregiver number 3 seemed perfect until she sold photographs of the twins' medical equipment to a tabloid for $1,200. The headline read, "Oil Tycoon's Tragic Daughters, A Life in Darkness." Rowan sued her into bankruptcy and installed more cameras. Number 4 left bruises on Elia's arm from careless handling. Rowan's hands shook when he confronted her. She claimed the child was clumsy. He had security escort her off the property and filed a police report that went nowhere. Number 5 tried to access his financial accounts from the estate computer. The bank's fraud department caught it. She disappeared before he could press charges. 6 through 9 were variations of incompetence. Forgot medications. Ignored safety protocols. Showed up late or drunk or not at all. Each failure carved deeper grooves into Rowan's certainty that trusting anyone was a mistake. That the only thing protecting his daughters was his constant vigilance through screens and schedules and rules that left no room for human error. Then Mabel Sterling walked into his office 14 days ago. She sat across from him with her hands folded in her lap. Resume perfect. Background check clean. References from families in Minneapolis and Fargo who praised her patience and skill. 34 years old. Nursing degree from University of Minnesota. 5 years experience with special needs children. Her credentials looked flawless. But something in her eyes made Rowan's stomach tighten. She looked at him like she could see through the walls he'd built. Like she knew exactly what he'd become. Mr. Voslin, she'd said in a voice that didn't waver. I need you to understand something before we go further. If you hire me, I'm going to care about your daughters. Not just manage them. Not just keep them safe. I'm going to believe they can do more than survive. And that might make you uncomfortable. It did make him uncomfortable. But he was desperate and tired and running out of options. So he hired her anyway. Gave her the same speech he'd given the others. No improvising. No bonding. No hope speeches. Follow the medical protocols exactly. The doctors have made their prognosis clear. We accept it. We adapt. We don't pretend miracles are possible. Mabel had nodded slowly. I understand what the doctors said. But she didn't say she agreed. For 2 weeks Rowan watched her through the cameras. Watched her enter the twins' room at 7 every morning. Watched her greet them with warmth that felt genuine instead of professional. Watched her read to them. Not children's books but stories about Helen Keller and Louis Braille. People who'd been told they'd never communicate. Never contribute. Never matter. People who'd proven the world wrong. Rowan told himself it was harmless. Let her have her inspirational stories. Let her believe in fairy tales. As long as she followed the medical routine and kept his daughter safe, he didn't care what she believed. But then small things started changing. Ellie smiled more. Her face would light up when Mabel entered the room. She'd never done that for the other caregivers. Elias started humming. Quiet melodies that matched the songs Mabel sang when she thought no one was listening. The child had been silent for months before that. The twins moved differently. More confident. Less hesitant. Like they trusted their environment in a way they hadn't before. Rowan watched it all on his monitors late at night when the house went quiet and dark. He'd sit in his office with the blue glow of screens lighting his face and wonder what was happening. Wonder if he was seeing real progress or just desperate pattern recognition in random data. Wonder if hope was contagious and if he should quarantine himself before it infected him too. Because hope, real hope, was the most dangerous thing Rowan could imagine. Hope meant vulnerability. Hope meant believing things could get better. And the last time he'd believed that, his wife died on a hospital bed while he held her hand and lied that everything would be okay. Now his cracked phone screen showed him Mabel Sterling in his daughter's room at 2:47 in the morning doing something that looked like witchcraft or medicine or maybe both. Her hands on their eyes. Her lips moving in words he couldn't hear. And his daughters, his blind, helpless daughters who'd been told they'd never see anything, ever, were reaching up toward her face like they could perceive light for the first time. Rowan's throat closed. His pulse hammered in his ears. He needed to stop this. Needed to fire her before she damaged them with false hope. Before she made them believe in impossible things. Before she broke their hearts the way his had been broken when he realized money and power and desperation couldn't buy his wife one more breath. But his finger hovered over her contact. One call, and she'd be gone. One call, and everything would go back to careful routine and managed expectations, and the slow certainty that his daughters would live limited lives in a world built for people who could see. He didn't press the button. Instead, he rewound the footage. Watched it again. Mabel's hands covering their eyes. The girls perfectly still. Patient. Trusting her in a way they'd never trusted him. And then, right at the 2:51 mark when Mabel removed her hands and sat back on her heels, both twins turned their faces toward the window. Toward the faint light from the security lamp outside. Their expressions shifted. Ellie's mouth opened in a small O shape. Aliyah blinked rapidly, like something startled her. like they'd seen something. Rowan's hands started shaking. This was impossible. The doctors had been clear. The optic nerves didn't function. Light couldn't reach the brain. Vision wasn't a skill you learned. It was hardware. Biology. You either had it or you didn't.
His daughters didn't.
Would never. End of story. But Mabel Sterling was doing something in that room at 3 in the morning that made his blind daughters turn toward light. And Rowan didn't know if he was watching a miracle or a crime. Didn't know if this woman was a savior or a monster. Didn't know anything except that his carefully controlled world had just cracked open and something terrifying was crawling out. He pulled up more footage. Not just tonight. Every night for the past 2 weeks. Started watching at higher speed. Scanning for patterns.
There.
Night 6. Mabel enters at 1:15 a.m. with something small wrapped in cloth. Night 9.
Same time.
Same cloth bundle. She unwraps it. A penlight. She shines it into Ellie's eyes. Then Elias. Testing pupil response. Why would a caregiver test for vision response in blind children? Night 11. She brings printed sheets. Holds them close to the twins' faces. Black paper with white shapes. High contrast images. She moves them slowly. Left to right. Up and down. Ellie's head follows the movement. Not perfectly, but enough. Rowan's vision blurred. He was seeing things. Had to be. Confirmation bias.
Pareidolia.
His grief-broken brain inventing patterns in chaos. These were blind children.
Blind.
The word meant something specific. It meant darkness. It meant never. It meant the specialists who'd examined them weren't wrong. But Mabel Sterling looked at his daughters like the specialists had missed something. Like permanent wasn't the same as unchangeable. Like never was just the first answer, not the final one. And Rowan realized with cold certainty that he had to confront her. Had to demand answers. Had to know what she was doing to his children in the dark hours, when she thought he wasn't watching. Because he was always watching. That was his job now. His purpose. The only thing standing between his daughters and a world that would hurt them if he looked away for even a second. He pulled up the live feed one more time. The timestamp read 6:47 a.m. Almost morning. Mabel would arrive in 13 minutes for her shift. He'd be waiting. He'd demand an explanation. And if she couldn't give him one that made sense, if she'd been giving his daughters false hope or experimental treatments or anything that could hurt them worse than they were already hurt, he'd fire her. Call the medical board. Maybe even the police. But first he needed to see one more thing. Rowan pulled up footage from 6 nights ago. The night that had been nagging at him. The night his security system logged unusual activity in the twins' room. He'd meant to review it before now, but work had pulled him under, and he'd forgotten. That was happening more often lately. Forgetting. Losing time. The cameras remembered everything, but Rowan was starting to realize he remembered almost nothing. Just screens and schedules, and the hollow feeling that he was watching his daughters' lives instead of living in them. The footage loaded. 11:30, 4 p.m. The twins' room was dark except for the night light by the door. Then movement. Mabel entering. But she wasn't alone. A man followed her inside.
Tall.
Dark clothing. Face obscured by the angle. They stood close together. Whispering. The audio was too low to make out words. The man handed Mabel something. Documents. She nodded.
Took them.
Tucked them under the mattress of Ellie's bed. The man squeezed her shoulder. She squeezed back. Then he left through the garden door that was supposed to be locked after 8 p.m. Rowan's blood went cold. Who was that man? What were those documents? Why was Mabel hiding things in his daughter's room? Was this an inside job? A kidnapping plot? Identity theft? Something worse? Every terrible possibility flooded his mind at once. The fear he'd been managing through surveillance and control suddenly felt justified. Vindicated. He'd been right to trust no one. Right to watch everything. Right to assume the worst because the worst always found a way in.
His phone rang.
Unknown number. Rowan's hand hovered over it. Probably spam. But something made him answer. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice. Distorted. Mechanical.
Wrong.
Stop watching. Stop asking questions. You don't know what you're dealing with. The line went dead. Rowan stared at his phone. His reflection looked back from the cracked screen. A stranger's face. Hollow eyes. 3 years of grief aging him into someone his wife wouldn't recognize. Someone his daughters barely knew. He'd built this fortress to protect them. But standing here in his office at dawn holding a phone that had just delivered a threat in a voice from nightmares, Rowan couldn't escape one terrible question. What if the danger wasn't coming from outside? What if it was already inside? What if Mabel Sterling wasn't the answer? What if she was the threat he'd been watching for all along? He pulled up the live feed one last time. Checked the twins' room. Both beds were perfectly made. Night lights still glowing. Everything normal. Everything safe. Except the beds were empty. Rowan's stomach dropped. He checked the timestamp. 6:52 a.m. Mabel's shift didn't start for 8 minutes. The night nurse should still be on duty. The twins should be sleeping or just waking. They should be there. He cycled through every camera in the house.
Kitchen.
Living room. Hallways. Garden. Library. All empty. No movement. No twins. No staff. The house was silent. Then he saw it. The window in the twins' room. Wide open. Curtains billowing in the November wind. North Dakota cold pouring into the heated room. And on the windowsill, small handprints in the frost. Child-sized. Leading out. Someone had taken his daughters. Or his daughters had left. Or something worse. Rowan's hands shook so violently he could barely hold the phone. He pulled up the archived footage. Rewound to 20 minutes ago. Watched the twins' room. Watched the beds.
Watched.
Then, at 6:34 a.m. the door opened. Not from a hallway. From the inside. Like someone had been hiding in the room. Waiting. A figure moved to each bed. Lifted the girls gently. Both children went without struggle. Without sound. Like they knew this person. Trusted them. The figure carried them to the window. Opened it. Handed them through to someone outside. Then climbed through themselves. The camera angle was wrong. Rowan couldn't see the face. Couldn't identify who'd just stolen his daughters from inside his fortress. But he saw something else. Something that made his throat close and his vision narrow to a pinpoint. The figure paused at the window. Turned back. Looked directly at camera 7 mounted above the bookshelf. Stared at it for 5 long seconds. Then reached up and adjusted the angle. Just slightly. Just enough to make sure Rowan would see what came next. On the twins' dresser, written in what looked like red lipstick across the mirror, were 3 words in perfect handwriting. Check the drops. Check the drops. Rowan's vision tunneled. The red lipstick message stared back from the security feed like an accusation. Like whoever took his daughters wanted him to find something. Wanted him to question everything. His finger jabbed the intercom. Security.
Now.
His voice didn't sound like his own. Thorne Madrigal, night security, burst through the office door 60 seconds later. Sir, my daughters are gone. The estate erupted. Staff scrambling. Doors slamming. Voices overlapping in panic that felt distant and muffled like Rowan was underwater. He stood in the center of his office, watching people move through his 40 acres of North Dakota prairie like ants disturbed from a hill. 34 rooms. Every one of them suddenly feeling like a hiding place. A crime scene. A failure. Nadia had wanted this house. Grew up in Fargo in a cramped apartment where she could touch both walls of her bedroom at once. She'd walked through this estate 7 years ago with her hand in his and said the words that made him write the check. I want our children to have space. Room to run. Sky that goes on forever. She'd painted the nursery herself while 8 months pregnant. Yellow walls. Prairie wildflowers climbing up the corners. 3 cribs arranged so the babies could see each other when they woke. The babies never saw anything. And Nadia never saw them grow past 6 months. Now the house felt like a mausoleum. 34 rooms and Rowan used 3. His office where he worked from home managing oil investments he didn't care about. The kitchen where he forgot to eat. The guest bedroom in the east wing where he slept because the master bedroom was where Nadia died. Officially fell down the stairs. Officially an accident. Officially over. He avoided the nursery. Avoided the master suite. Avoided every room that held memory. The house had become a maze of places he refused to go, and cameras that went for him instead. His phone buzzed. Bismarck, PD. He answered without hearing his own voice. Words tumbled out. 4-year-old twins.
Blind.
Missing. Suspect potentially inside job. The dispatcher's calm questions felt like knives. Any custody disputes? Any ransom demands? When did you last see them in person? In person. Rowan's throat closed. When had he last been in their room? Touched their faces? Spoken to them without a camera between them? Yesterday? Last week? He couldn't remember. He watched them every night. Monitored their breathing. Checked that their covers were straight and their medical equipment was functioning. But standing in the same room, looking at them with his actual eyes instead of digital ones? The twins were 4 years old. Born 8 weeks premature at Sanford Medical Center. Ellie came first. 3 pounds 4 ounces. Aliyah followed 90 seconds later. 2 pounds 11 ounces. Both of them fighting for air in plastic boxes while Nadia hemorrhaged in the delivery room and Rowan stood frozen in the hallway between his dying wife and his struggling daughters. The doctors diagnosed the blindness at 4 days old. Congenital bilateral optic nerve hypoplasia. The nerves that carry visual information from the eye to the brain simply didn't develop. Not damaged. Not diseased. Absent. You can't fix what was never there. The specialists, 14 of them over 4 years, had all agreed. The girls would never see. Never drive. Never read printed text. Never attend regular school. Never be independent without significant support. Rowan hired everyone. Spent $40,000 a month on medical care that didn't cure anything. Orientation and mobility specialists who taught them to navigate with white canes they were too young to master. Braille tutors for children who couldn't yet understand that raised meant words. Occupational therapists who worked on life skills for a life the doctors said would always need assistance. Professional. Expensive. Hopeless. He watched every session through cameras. Took notes. Tracked progress that wasn't progress. Convinced himself that surveillance was love. That monitoring was protection. That distance kept him safe from losing more than he'd already lost. A knock on the office door. Scarlett Chambers entered without waiting for permission. She'd been doing that for 8 years. Started as Nadia's assistant when the pregnancy got complicated. Managed doctor appointments and dietary restrictions, and the 100 small details that came with high-risk twins. After Nadia died, she'd taken over the estate. Managed the household budget. Coordinated staff schedules. Ordered medical supplies. Became the backbone of a house that would have collapsed without her. Rowan trusted her completely. She'd loved Nadia too. Mr. Voslin. Her voice was soft. Concerned. The kind of concern that felt genuine. The police are here. But before you speak with them, she hesitated. Twisted her hands together. I hate to mention this. I'm sure it's nothing. But I saw Mabel in the twins' room very late last night. Around 2:30. I thought perhaps one of the girls was sick, but when I checked this morning, everything seemed fine. Rowan's jaw clenched. You saw her? Just for a moment. Through the doorway. She was kneeling by their beds. Scarlett's eyes met his. I should have said something earlier.
I'm sorry.
I just didn't want to accuse anyone without cause. This aligned perfectly with the footage. 2:47 a.m. Mabel's hands on their eyes. His daughters reaching toward her like they could see. And now Scarlett confirming she was there. Confirming something was happening. Pull her file again, Rowan said. Everything. Background check. References. Previous employment. I want to know who she really is. Scarlett nodded and left. Rowan's hands shook as he opened his laptop. But before he could access Mabel's records, his phone rang again. Quentin Darkridge, the family attorney who'd managed Nadia's estate since her death, who controlled the trust that would pass to the twins when they turned 18 or to Rowan if they didn't make it that long, who'd been suggesting for 2 years that Rowan consider alternative care arrangements. I heard. Quentin's voice was clipped. Professional. Cold in the way lawyers were cold. The girls are missing. Yes. Any leads? Working on it. Silence. Then Quentin said the thing Rowan had been dreading. Have you reconsidered specialized care facilities? This wouldn't have happened if they were in a secure medical environment with professional 24-hour oversight. Rowan's grip tightened on the phone. They're my daughters, not patients. They're blind 4-year-olds who require constant supervision. Supervision that clearly failed. Quentin's tone didn't change.
Didn't soften.
I'm not judging. I'm stating facts. The trust makes provisions for institutional care if it's determined to be in their best interest. They're not going to a facility. Another caregiver has failed. That's 10 in 3 years. Quentin let that number hang. How long will this one last? Assuming she's not responsible for their disappearance. The line went dead before Rowan could respond. He sat alone in his office surrounded by monitors showing empty rooms. His daughters were gone.
His wife was dead.
His attorney thought he was unfit. His house was full of people who worked for him, but didn't know him. And somewhere in this mess was a woman named Mabel Sterling who'd been doing something to his blind daughters in the middle of the night that looked like hope or crime, and Rowan couldn't tell the difference anymore. He pulled up her employment file, skimmed past the credentials he'd already verified, stopped at the employment history. 3 years of gap between jobs. The previous employer listed was a medical practice in Minneapolis. No longer in operation according to the notes. He called the number anyway. Disconnected. He searched the business name. Nothing. Like it had been erased. The references checked out when he'd hired her. 2 families in Minneapolis. 1 in Fargo. All glowing recommendations about her patience and skill with special needs children. But now reading them again, they felt rehearsed. Scripted. Too perfect. Something didn't add up. Rowan thought he was protecting his daughters by watching everything. By knowing everything. By controlling every variable that could hurt them. But the real danger? It's the thing you're not watching for. The threat that hides in plain sight behind perfect credentials and gentle hands and words that sound like hope. If you've ever ignored a warning sign because you wanted to believe someone was good, you understand what comes next. Stay close. Because what happens next exposes the cost of blind trust. And if this story reminds you why awareness matters, why questioning everything might save you from losing everything, maybe it should remind someone else too. Rowan pulled up archived footage from 6 nights ago. His hands were steadier now. The panic compressed into cold focus. He needed to see what he'd missed. Needed to find the pattern he'd overlooked. The footage loaded. 11 p.m. The twins' room was dark except for the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. Then the door opened. Mabel entered alone. She carried something small wrapped in dark cloth. She moved to the center of the room.
Stopped.
Then turned slowly until she faced camera 7, the one mounted above the bookshelf. Hidden behind a row of picture books the twins would never read. She stared directly at it. 5 seconds.
10.
Like she'd known exactly where it was all along. Like she wanted him to see this. Like this was a message meant specifically for him. Then she unwrapped the cloth. A penlight. Medical grade. The kind doctors used for neurological exams. She knelt beside Ellie's bed. Gently lifted the child's eyelid. Shined the light directly into her pupil. Watched for response. Did the same with Elia. Testing their vision. Testing for something the 14 specialists said didn't exist. Testing like she didn't believe the diagnosis. Or like she knew something the doctors didn't.
Something they'd missed.
Something impossible. Why would a caregiver test blind children for pupil response unless she thought they could see? Why would a caregiver test blind children for pupil response unless she thought they could see? The question burrowed into Rowan's skull and wouldn't leave. He closed the footage. Opened a new document. Started building a timeline of Mabel Sterling's activities hour by hour. Every camera angle. Every movement. Every moment. She thought no one was watching. He'd been monitoring casually before. Background surveillance while he worked. Now it became obsession. 24/7 focus on one person.
On what she did when she entered that room.
On how she violated every protocol he'd established. Day 2 footage. 9:15 a.m. Mabel sang while changing Ellie's clothes. Not nursery rhymes. Folk songs with complex melodies that created audio distractions the orientation specialist explicitly said to avoid. Blind children needed consistent sonic environments. Predictable patterns. Not variables that confused spatial awareness. But Ellie smiled, turned her head toward Mabel's voice, moved her lips like she was trying to match the tune. Day 5. 2:30 p.m. Mabel sat between the twins on the floor describing things they'd never see. The sky today is gray, like wet concrete. But there's a break in the clouds, golden light coming through. It makes the prairie grass look like it's on fire.
Pointless.
Cruel even. Why describe color to children born without the hardware to process it? Why paint pictures with words that meant nothing to them? But Alaya tilted her face upward, toward the window, like she was trying to imagine what Mabel described, like the words created something in her mind. Day 7. Mabel moved furniture, pushed the rocking chair from the corner to beside Ellie's bed, shifted the toy chest 3 feet to the left, changed the spatial map the girls had been learning for months. The mobility therapist would be furious. Blind children needed consistency, stable environments where muscle memory could compensate for missing vision. Rowan's jaw clenched watching her rearrange the room. This was a safety violation. The twins would stumble, get hurt. But he didn't stop her. He needed to see where this went. Day 9. She took them outside. November in North Dakota meant temperatures in the 30s. Wind that cut through layers. Weather risk for children with compromised immune systems from premature birth. But Mabel bundled them in coats and led them into the garden. Let them touch the frozen grass. Feel the wind on their faces. Cold is just another kind of touch, she said. Temperature tells you about the world just like sight does. None of it made sense for blind children. None of it followed the medical protocols designed by specialists who understood their condition better than some caregiver with a nursing degree. But the twins responded. They smiled more, vocalized more, reached for Mabel when she entered the room in ways they'd never reached for anyone else. Rowan's hands shook as he pulled up Day 4 footage. The moment that had been nagging at him. The moment that looked impossible. 10:20 a.m. Mabel sat cross-legged on the floor. She held a bright red rubber ball, the kind toddlers played with, high contrast against her dark skin. She positioned it 6 inches from Ellie's face, moved it slowly, left to right. Ellie's head turned, followed the movement. Rowan's breath stopped. He rewound, watched again. Coincidence. Had to be. Random neck movement. Muscle spasm. Anything except what it looked like. But Mabel did it again. Right to left this time. And Ellie's head tracked. Not perfectly. Not smoothly. But deliberately. Like she was following something. Like she could see something. 3 more times. Each time, Ellie responded. Each time her head movement matched the ball's trajectory with increasing accuracy. Rowan's medical knowledge, limited but expensive, told him blind people didn't track objects. Tracking required visual input, required the eye to detect motion and the brain to process direction. His daughters didn't have the neural pathways for that. The optic nerves didn't function. Light couldn't reach the visual cortex. This was biology. Hardware. Not something you could change with patience and red rubber balls. He told himself it meant nothing. Involuntary reflex. Pattern recognition in random noise. His desperate brain inventing meaning where none existed. But he couldn't stop watching. Day 11. Mabel brought printed sheets. Black paper with white geometric shapes. High contrast images. Contrast sensitivity training. She held them close to Alaya's face. Moved them in patterns. Asked questions blind children shouldn't be able to answer. Do you see the circle? Can you tell me when it moves? Day 13. Light perception exercises. She used a flashlight. Shined it toward Ellie's face from different angles. Tell me when you see the light, sweetheart. Just say yes when it's there. Ellie said yes.
Twice.
Day 14. Depth perception games with textured objects. Wooden blocks at varying distances. Reach for the closest one. You can feel which is near and which is far. Your hands know even if your eyes don't yet.
Yet.
That word. That promise embedded in every interaction. Like the diagnosis wasn't permanent. Like never wasn't final. Like 14 specialists could all be wrong. Rowan's anger built watching her work. This was cruelty disguised as kindness. False hope that would destroy his daughters when it failed. When they realized they'd been chasing something impossible. When the truth crushed them the way it had crushed him. I know you see something, baby girl. Mabel's voice came through the speaker soft and certain. I know you do. But they couldn't. The doctors had been clear. These exercises were useless for their condition. Might as well teach them to fly. Might as well promise them the moon. Rowan pulled up footage from yesterday afternoon. 12:30 p.m. Mabel's lunch break. The twins' room should have been empty except for the girls. But the door opened. Scarlett Chambers entered carrying a small tray. The prescription eye drops. Routine medical care administered twice daily. Morning and night. The ophthalmologist prescribed them to prevent infection and maintain eye health even though the organs didn't function properly. Scarlett approached each bed, tilted back their small heads with practiced gentleness, applied 2 drops to each eye, waited for them to blink and absorb the medication. Nothing suspicious. Nothing unusual. Standard medical protocol. But Rowan noticed something he'd never paid attention to before. Scarlett personally handled all medical supplies. Ordered them herself. Received shipments herself. Administered medication herself. Never delegated. Never let anyone else touch the pharmaceutical routine. She was protective of it. Insisted on being the one to give the drops. He'd never questioned it. Scarlett was trustworthy. Competent. She'd managed Nadia's complex medical needs during pregnancy. Of course, she'd handle the twins' medications with the same careful attention. But now, watching her leave the room with that small tray tucked under her arm, Rowan felt something shift. Not suspicion exactly. Just awareness. The kind that came too late. Evening footage from yesterday. 7:45 p.m. Mabel read to the twins before bed. Not Goodnight Moon, or Where the Wild Things Are. A biography. Helen Keller's story told for children. About a girl who couldn't see or hear but learned to communicate anyway. Learned to read and write and speak. Learned to prove everyone wrong. Mabel's voice carried weight on the recording. They told Helen she'd never understand language. Never connect with other people. Never contribute to the world. But she learned. She found a way. And you will too. The message was clear.
Direct.
Aimed at children who supposedly couldn't see, but also at whoever was watching. Mabel didn't accept the diagnosis. Didn't accept impossible. Didn't accept that Rowan's daughters were finished before they started. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He grabbed his phone. Called Scarlett. I need to speak with Mabel. Tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. My office. Of course, Mr. Voslin. Is there a problem? We'll see. He hung up. Stared at the monitors. Tried to sleep, but couldn't. The house was too quiet. Too big. Too full of rooms he didn't use and memories he couldn't face. At 1:30 a.m., he gave up. Pulled up the live feed from the twins' room. Mabel was there. Again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Rowan leaned forward. A figure stood beside her.
Male. Tall.
Dark clothing that blended with the shadows. They were close together. Heads bent. Whispering words the audio couldn't capture. The man's hand moved. Passed something to Mabel. Documents. Papers folded in thirds. She took them. Examined them by the nightlight's glow. Nodded. The man squeezed her shoulder. She squeezed back. Familiar gesture. Comfortable. Like they'd done this before. Like they knew each other well. Then he walked to the garden door. The one that was supposed to be locked after 8 p.m. The one Rowan specifically secured because it was a ground floor vulnerability. But the man opened it easily. No force. No sound. Like he had a key. Like he'd been given access. He disappeared into the North Dakota night. Mabel stood alone. She looked down at the documents in her hands. Then knelt beside Ellie's bed. Lifted the mattress corner.
Tucked the papers underneath.
Smoothed the blankets. straightened, looked at camera 7, stared directly at it, smiled, then left through the hallway door. Rowan's blood went cold. What was she hiding? Who was that man? What were those documents? This wasn't unauthorized therapy methods or misguided hope. This was conspiracy. Planning.
Inside job.
His daughters were in that room sleeping while strangers passed secret documents and smiled at surveillance cameras. While he sat in his office watching through screens instead of protecting them in person. He reached for his phone to call police. But stopped. He needed to confront her first. Needed to demand answers. Needed to know what he was dealing with before involving authorities who'd ask questions he couldn't answer. Like, when was the last time you were actually in your daughter's room? Like, why do you watch them through cameras instead of putting them to bed yourself? Like, what kind of father are you? Tomorrow. 7 a.m. No more waiting. No more watching. He'd make Mabel Sterling explain everything, or he'd have her arrested. One or the other. But first he needed to sleep. Needed to think clearly. Needed to prepare for confrontation. He closed the laptop. The monitors went dark. And Rowan sat alone in his office, knowing that when morning came, everything was about to break open. Morning came cold and gray. Rowan waited in the hallway outside the twins' room. 6:52 a.m. Mabel would arrive in 8 minutes. He'd rehearsed this confrontation in his head all night. The questions. The accusations. The consequences. But standing here now, listening to his daughter's soft breathing through the door, his certainty felt brittle. Footsteps on the stairs. Mabel appeared at the top. She saw him.
Stopped.
Her expression didn't change.
Come.
Like she'd been expecting this. Like she'd known from the beginning it would end here. My office.
Now.
She followed without a word. The office felt different in daylight. Cold despite the sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking 40 acres of prairie. Dark wood furniture that Nadia had chosen because it reminded her of her father's study. The space where Rowan had signed documents that moved millions of dollars. Where he'd buried himself in work instead of grief. Where he watched his daughters through screens instead of holding them. He didn't sit. Neither did Mabel. They stood on opposite sides of his desk like opponents in a ring. What were you doing in their room at 2:47 a.m. last Tuesday? Mabel's hands stayed loose at her sides. Vision therapy exercises. They're blind. Therapy is pointless. 14 doctors said that. Her voice was steady. Too steady. Did any of them try? Rowan's jaw clenched. Are you suggesting you know better than specialists? Than people who've studied these conditions for decades? I'm suggesting they diagnosed a 4-day-old premature infant and never looked again. Mabel took a step forward. I'm suggesting they saw the initial scans and wrote your daughters off as permanent failures. I'm suggesting they gave you a verdict and you accepted it because questioning meant hoping. And hoping meant risk. The words hit like fists. Rowan's hands gripped the desk edge. You're giving them false hope. When this fails, when they realize they've been chasing something impossible. When did hope become worse than giving up? Silence. Heavy and thick. Outside the window, the prairie grass bent under November wind. Inside, Rowan felt something crack in his chest. Something he'd sealed shut 3 years ago when Nadia died, and the doctors told him his daughters would live in darkness forever. Who was in the room with you last night? His voice came out harder than intended. 1:30 a.m.
Male.
Dark clothing. He gave you documents. You hid them under the mattress. Who is he? Mabel's face changed. Guards went up. Walls built behind her eyes. Someone helping me. Helping you do what? Protect your daughters. From what? She hesitated. The pause stretched too long. I can't tell you yet. Then you're fired. The words came out automatic. Scripted. 9 caregivers before her had heard the same sentence. But Mabel didn't flinch. Fire me, and they'll die. The words hung in the air like ice. Like something sharp and cold that cut through everything Rowan thought he understood. His breath stopped. His vision narrowed.
What?
If I tell you now, you won't believe me. Mabel's voice dropped. You'll think I'm insane. You need to see it first. You need to understand what's been happening in this house since your wife died. See what? Rowan stepped around the desk. What are you talking about? Mabel looked at him with something that might have been pity or fear. That your daughters aren't blind. They're being kept blind. She walked past him before he could respond. Didn't wait for dismissal. Didn't take her coat from the hook or her bag from the staff room. Just walked straight to the front door and left. The door closed with a quiet click that felt louder than slamming. Rowan stood in his office shaking, hands trembling, mind racing through possibilities that all sounded insane. Kept blind. What did that even mean? How could someone keep another person blind? You couldn't just turn vision on and off like a switch. Unless it was medication. Unless it was treatment that looked like help but was actually harm. Unless someone had been poisoning his daughters for years and he'd been too buried in surveillance and grief to notice. Mr. Voslin? Scarlett appeared in the doorway. Concern painted across her features. I heard raised voices. Is everything all right? Mabel's gone.
Oh.
Scarlett stepped inside, closed the door behind her. Perhaps it's for the best. She was unconventional. The twins need stability, routine, not experimental methods. Rowan nodded without really hearing. His mind was still on Mabel's words. Being kept blind. I can take over their care temporarily, Scarlett offered. Until you find someone suitable. I'll handle their medications myself. You focus on work, on finding them. She paused. They are still missing, yes? The question snapped Rowan back. Police are searching. No leads yet. I'm so sorry. Scarlett's hand touched his arm. Brief. Comforting. Nadia would trust me to care for them. Let me help. Rowan agreed because he didn't have energy to refuse. Because Scarlett had been there through everything. Because trusting her was easier than trusting his own crumbling judgment. She left with a barely visible smile. Satisfied. Like something had gone according to plan. Evening came too fast. The house stayed quiet except for police radios and search teams coordinating in the driveway. No sign of the twins. No ransom calls. No leads. Just absence where his daughters should be. Except they were back. The police had found them 3 hours ago wandering near the highway 10 miles north.
Disoriented. Cold.
But unharmed. They couldn't explain where they'd been or who'd taken them. Just repeated one name over and over. Miss Mabel. Now they sat in their room asking for her. Ellie was crying, small shoulders shaking with sobs that broke something in Rowan's chest. He stood in the doorway, actually stood in their room for the first time in weeks, and watched his daughters grieve someone who'd only been in their lives 2 weeks. Where is she? Ellie's voice came out broken. She promised she'd teach us to see. Rowan's blood went cold. See what, sweetheart? Aliyah turned her face toward his voice. The colors. The lights. She said we could. She said the doctors were wrong. Rowan knelt beside their beds. His daughters' faces were wet with tears. Their small hands reached for someone who wasn't there. Someone who'd believed in them when he'd stopped believing. When he'd accepted impossible as permanent. What if Mabel was right? What if he'd just fired the only person who saw his daughters as more than their diagnosis? What if his control and fear and desperate need to protect them had actually destroyed their only chance? He left the room. Pulled up security footage from this morning's confrontation. Rewound to the moment Mabel said they're being kept blind. Enhanced the image. Studied her face. Her expression wasn't crazy. It was terrified. Like she knew something dangerous. Something that put her at risk for saying it out loud. He fast-forwarded to the moment she left. The camera by the front door caught her stopping, turning back toward the house. Her lips moved. 3 words. Rowan enhanced the video. Read her lips. Check the drops. What drops? The twins' medication? The prescription eye drops Scarlett administered twice daily? The routine care that was supposed to maintain eye health in organs that didn't function?
His phone rang.
Unknown number. Rowan's hand shook as he answered. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice.
Distorted.
Mechanical.
Wrong.
If you want to see your daughters again, stop looking for answers. The line went dead. Rowan spun toward the monitor showing the twins' room. The beds were perfectly made. Night light glowing. Everything normal. Except the beds were empty. Both of them. The window stood open. Curtains blowing in November wind. And on the floor beside Ellie's bed, small footprints in what looked like powder. White powder. Like someone had scattered something. Like evidence left deliberately. His daughters were gone again. And this time Rowan knew exactly what he needed to do. He grabbed the bottle of prescription eye drops from the twins' bathroom. Held it up to the light. The label looked official. Professional. Prescribed by Dr. Gideon Harcrow. But Mabel's words echoed in his skull.
Check the drops.
Being kept blind. Fire me, and they'll die. Rowan's hands wouldn't stop shaking as he pocketed the bottle and ran for his car. He needed answers.
And he needed them now.
Before whoever took his daughters finished what they'd started. Rowan ran. Down the hallway. Through the east wing. His shoulder hit the doorframe of the twins' room hard enough to leave a bruise he wouldn't notice until tomorrow. The window was open. Curtains blowing inward carrying November cold. The beds were empty, but the sheets were still warm. 12 minutes. Maybe less. They'd been here 12 minutes ago. He screamed. Scarlet.
Thorn.
Someone. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Thorn Madrigal, night security, burst through the door. Gun drawn. Face alert. Sir? My daughters. They're gone. Again. Rowan's voice didn't sound like his. Too high.
Too thin.
The window. Someone took them through the window. Thorn moved to the opening. Looked down at the garden below. First floor drop. Easy access. I'll check the perimeter. But sir, he turned back. No security alerts triggered. System shows everything normal. That's impossible. System was disabled remotely. I'm seeing it now on my phone. Thorn held up the security app. All cameras showed green. All sensors active. But the logs showed a 12-minute gap. 9:47 p.m. to 9:59 p.m. Blackout. Like someone had cut power to the entire network then restored it without triggering backup alerts. Whoever did this knew the system. Had access codes. Or had inside access. Rowan finished. His stomach dropped. Someone in his house. Someone with clearance. Someone he trusted. He pulled out his phone. Cycled through every camera manually. Kitchen empty. Library empty. Garden empty. Driveway empty. 47 cameras, and not one of them showed his daughters. Not one captured who took them or where they went. Like they'd vanished into air. Police arrived in 8 minutes. Bismarck PD with lights that painted the prairie red and blue. Detective Morris interviewed Rowan in the foyer while officers searched the grounds. Questions came rapid fire. Clinical. Necessary. Any custody disputes?
No.
Their mother is dead. Ransom demands? A phone call. Threatened me. Told me to stop looking for answers. Answers to what? Rowan's hands shook. I don't know. Their caregiver said something this morning. Said my daughters were being kept blind. Then she left. Then someone called. Then they were gone. Detective Morris wrote everything down. This caregiver. Mabel Sterling. Where is she now? I don't know. I fired her this morning. Fired her for what? For giving them false hope. The words tasted like ash. For doing unauthorized therapy. For violating protocols. Could she have taken them? The question hung heavy. Rowan saw Mabel's face in his mind. Her calm expression. Her terrified eyes when she said they'd die if he fired her. Her lips forming the words, check the drops as she left. Was she a threat? A kidnapper? Or was she exactly what she claimed, someone trying to protect them? I don't know, he said finally. I don't know anything anymore. The Amber Alert went out at 10:23 p.m. 2 4-year-old girls.
Blind.
Last seen wearing pink and yellow pajamas. Endangered missing. Every second matters. The words scrolled across the detective's tablet like a death sentence. Rowan collapsed in the hallway. His back hit the wall. He slid down until he sat on marble floor that Nadia had chosen because it looked like frozen water. His chest wouldn't expand. Couldn't pull air. This was his worst nightmare realized. Not just losing them. but losing them because he'd been too afraid to see what was happening. Too broken to be present. Too buried in surveillance to actually protect them. Mr. Voslin. Scarlett appeared. Her face was wet, eyes red, hands twisting together. This is my fault. I should have watched them closer. I should have been in their room. I should have. Her voice broke. Genuine distress. Genuine pain. Rowan looked up at her. You couldn't have known. But Mabel. Scarlett knelt beside him. She left angry this morning. What if she came back? What if she took them to punish you for firing her? The seed planted so carefully, so gently. Rowan's mind latched onto it. Mabel had been in the room at night. Mabel had hidden documents. Mabel had mysterious contacts. Mabel had access to everything. What if Scarlett was right? I'll help coordinate the search, Scarlett said. I'll do whatever the police need. Nadia would want me to protect them. I won't fail her again. She stood, touched his shoulder, left him sitting in the hallway while officers moved through his house like ghosts. Quentin Darkridge arrived 30 minutes later. Tailored suit, leather briefcase, face carved from stone. He found Rowan in the office staring at blank monitors. I heard, Quentin said. No preamble. No comfort. We need to discuss legal implications. Not now. Especially now. Quentin sat, opened his briefcase. If the twins aren't found within 48 hours, there are protocols. After 7 years, death can be legally presumed. The trust. They're not dead. Rowan's voice came out dangerous. I'm not saying they are. I'm saying this state has contingencies. If something happens to them, the trust dissolves. Assets transfer to. He stopped. Adjusted his glasses. It's complex. Transfer to who? Rowan leaned forward. Who benefits if my daughters die? That requires a formal meeting. Documents. I can't discuss details without proper. Answer the question. Quentin closed his briefcase. Nadia's will named several beneficiaries. Primary heir was you. Secondary were the twins.
Tertiary, he stood.
I'll schedule a meeting. When they're found. When everyone's thinking clearly. He left. And Rowan sat alone realizing someone in his orbit benefited from his daughter's disappearance. Someone close enough to matter. Close enough to be in the will. Close enough to have motive. He remembered Mabel's final message.
Check the drops.
He'd pocketed the bottle before police arrived but hadn't looked at it. Hadn't thought about it. Now he pulled it from his jacket. Small amber plastic. White cap. Label reading, Ellie and Elia Voslin. Apply 2 drops to each eye twice daily. Dr. Gideon Harkrow, ophthalmology. Rowan Googled the doctor on his phone. Small practice in Bismarck. Standard credentials. Licensed 15 years. But the practice only opened 8 months ago, right after Nadia died. He called the office number. Straight to voicemail. Full inbox. Couldn't leave a message. Something felt wrong. He went to the twins' bathroom. The one he'd walked past hundreds of times without entering. The one where Scarlett administered medications twice daily, with careful routine. He opened the cabinet. Found rows of identical bottles. All prescribed by Dr. Harkrow. All dated monthly. Then he checked the trash can. Found something that made his blood stop. An empty vial. Same prescription number. But the label was dated 8 months ago. The medication should have been replaced monthly. Should have been fresh. But this vial was ancient. Had been refilled over and over with something else. Something that wasn't medicine. Rowan stared at the empty vial. How many times had he walked past this bathroom without looking? How many warnings had he missed because he was too busy watching screens instead of seeing what mattered? Sometimes the truth isn't hidden. We just refuse to look. If you've ever missed what was right in front of you, you understand what comes next. The terrible moment when you realize you had the evidence all along. You just didn't want to see it. And if this story makes you look twice at your own blind spots, at the things you've been avoiding because looking means knowing and knowing means acting, maybe it should reach someone else who needs to see it too. His phone buzzed. 2:47 a.m. Text from unknown number. No words, just a photo. Rowan's hands shook as he opened it. Ellie and Elia.
Alive.
sitting in what looked like a basement. Concrete walls. Single light bulb hanging from exposed wiring. But they weren't scared. Weren't crying. They were smiling. Because standing behind them, hands on their small shoulders like a guardian, was Mabel Sterling. She wasn't holding them hostage. Her expression wasn't threatening. She was protecting them. The text arrived. They're safe.
For now.
The person who wants them dead is in your house. Trust no one. I'll contact you again. Delete this message. Rowan's entire body shook. Who was Mabel? What did she know? And who in his house wanted his daughters dead? Rowan stared at the photo. His daughters smiling in a basement with a woman who might be their kidnapper or their savior. The text said, trust no one. That meant police. That meant Scarlett. That meant everyone in his house who'd had access to his daughters for years. He was alone in this. He grabbed the eye drop bottle and his laptop. Left through the garage without telling anyone where he was going. Drove north toward Fargo in the 3 a.m. darkness with nothing but questions eating holes in his mind. 90 minutes on empty highway. Prairie stretching black and endless on both sides. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. The 24-hour pharmacy sat in a strip mall off I-94. Fluorescent lights buzzing. One clerk behind bulletproof glass, looking half asleep. Rowan walked to the prescription counter. Found a pharmacist, middle-aged woman with tired eyes, organizing pills into weekly containers. I need something analyzed. He set the bottle on the counter. Off the record. She looked at him, then at the bottle. Sir, if you need a prescription verified, $500 cash. Rowan pulled bills from his wallet. Just tell me what's actually in this bottle. No names. No paperwork. 3 hours from now, I was never here. The pharmacist's eyes moved from the money to his face. Saw something there that made her not ask questions. She took the bottle. This will take 3 hours. Wait or come back. I'll wait. He sat in his car in the parking lot. Couldn't go inside. Couldn't be around people. His daughters were missing, and he was 90 minutes from home waiting for a stranger to tell him if he'd been poisoning them for years. He opened his laptop. Started searching. Dr. Gideon Harcrow. Licensed ophthalmologist. 15 years in practice, according to State Medical Board. But his current practice only opened 8 months ago, right after Nadia died. The timing made Rowan's stomach clench. He dug deeper. Found liens.
Debt.
Multiple failed businesses. A man desperate for money who suddenly opened a new practice with expensive equipment.
Who funded that?
Rowan searched vision recovery. Blind children. Impossible cases. Medical journals flooded his screen. Articles from Johns Hopkins. Research from neuroplasticity institutes. Case studies of children with optic nerve hypoplasia who'd improved with early intervention. Light therapy. Vision training. Neural pathway development. Success rates were low, 15% maybe, but not zero. Not impossible. Everything Mabel had been doing. The contrast cards. The light exercises. The tracking games. It was real science.
Documented.
Studied. And 14 specialists had never mentioned it. Had looked at his 4-day-old premature daughters and written them off as permanent failures without trying. Rowan's worldview cracked. What if he'd accepted a lie? What if hope wasn't false, just difficult? What if the real cruelty was giving up before the fight started? The pharmacist knocked on his window at 6:15 a.m. Her face was grave. Rowan's chest tightened getting out of the car. Where did you get this? Her voice was quiet. Urgent. My daughter's prescription. Why? This isn't eye drops. She handed him a sealed envelope. It's a neurotoxin. Low dose. Long-term exposure causes optic nerve suppression. Someone's been poisoning whoever uses this. Rowan couldn't breathe. The parking lot tilted. Are you sure? I'm calling the police.
No.
His hand caught her arm. Not yet. I need 24 hours. Sir, this is attempted murder. My daughters are missing. The person who did this might be the person who took them. If you call now, if word gets out that I know, they'll kill my girls. His voice broke. Please. 24 hours. Then I'll bring everything to authorities. I swear. The pharmacist looked at him for a long moment, saw a father on the edge of collapse. She nodded slowly. $1,000. And you were never here. Rowan paid, took the sealed analysis, drove back toward Bismarck with proof that someone had been systematically poisoning his daughters, keeping them blind on purpose. For years. While he watched through cameras and never questioned why the medication never ran out. Why Scarlett personally handled every dose. Why the doctor who prescribed it had opened his practice right after Nadia died with money that came from somewhere. He pulled over at a rest stop, opened his laptop, searched Mabel Sterling ophthalmologist. Found the article buried on page 3 of results. Local doctor loses license after patient death. 4 years ago, Dr. Mabel Sterling of Minneapolis. Accused of malpractice. 6-year-old patient died during experimental vision treatment. Mabel claimed sabotage. Someone had tampered with surgical equipment. Investigation concluded negligence. License revoked. Career destroyed. Mabel disappeared from public record. Patient's name, Calder Beaumont. Rowan's vision blurred. Beaumont. Nadia's maiden name. He searched family records with shaking hands. Found the connection. Calder Beaumont was Nadia's nephew. Her brother's son. The child who died on Mabel's operating table was Nadia's family. And Mabel was working for Rowan now, protecting his daughters. Why would a woman whose career was destroyed by a Beaumont child's death risk everything to save 2 more Beaumont children? Unless she was telling the truth. Unless someone had sabotaged that procedure. Unless that same someone was now targeting Ellie and Elia. Unless Mabel had been hunting this person for 4 years.
His phone rang.
Unknown number. Rowan answered with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The distorted voice came through mechanical and cold. Did you find the poison? Good. Now you know. But you're missing the bigger picture. Who is this? Ask yourself, who ordered those drops? Who administered them every single day? Who gained access to your home right before Nadia died?
Pause.
Check the security footage from the night your wife fell. Camera 12. Hallway outside master bedroom. 11:47 p.m. Watch who walks past. The line went dead. Rowan's chest was tight. He pulled up archived footage on his laptop. 3 years ago. The night that destroyed everything. Camera 12. Hallway outside the master bedroom. 11:47 p.m. The hallway was dark. Then a figure appeared, walking toward the bedroom where Nadia was sleeping. The figure paused at the door, looked back toward the camera. The face was clear even in low light. Scarlett Chambers. She was carrying something in her hand, small and dark. Rowan couldn't make it out, but her expression cold, purposeful. Not the face of someone checking on her employer. The face of someone with intention. She opened the bedroom door, disappeared inside. 2 minutes passed. Then Nadia's scream tore through the audio feed. The fall. The sickening impact. Then silence. Scarlett walked back past camera 12. Her hands were empty now. Whatever she'd been carrying was gone. And she was smiling. Not broadly. Just a small satisfied curve of lips. Like something had gone according to plan. Rowan watched the footage 5 times. Watched Scarlett enter. Watched Nadia die. Watched Scarlett leave smiling. The police had ruled it an accident. A tragic fall downstairs. But here was proof. Video evidence that someone had been in that room. Someone who worked for them. Someone who'd been in his house for 8 years. Someone who'd been administering poison to his daughters every single day since they were born. Scarlett Chambers had killed his wife. Was killing his daughters. And Rowan had trusted her completely. Had given her control of their medical care. Had let her coordinate the search when they went missing. Had been so buried in grief and surveillance that he'd never looked at the person standing right in front of him. His phone buzzed. Text from the unknown number. Just an address. A warehouse district in North Bismarck. And 1 sentence. Come alone. Bring the footage. It's time you learned who Scarlett really is. Rowan sat in the rest stop parking lot watching the footage loop. 5 times.
10.
Scarlett entering the bedroom. Nadia's scream. Scarlett leaving with empty hands, and that smile. The police had ruled it an accident.
How?
He pulled archived footage from the next morning. Scarlett leaving the estate at 9 a.m. Driving to Bismarck Police Department. The exterior camera showed her entering. Timestamp: 9:14 a.m. She didn't leave until 11:22 a.m. Over 2 hours inside. When she walked out, she wasn't alone. Detective Reginald, the lead investigator on Nadia's case, walked her to her car. They stood close, talking, his hand on her shoulder. Comforting. Too familiar. Rowan searched Detective Marcus Reginald. Found retirement announcement from 6 months after Nadia's death. Early retirement at age 48. Bought a lake house in Brainerd, Minnesota, according to property records. Purchase price: $400,000.
Cash.
On a cop's pension? Scarlett had paid him off. Bought his silence. Covered up murder and called it accident. And Rowan had been too broken to question anything. Too buried in grief to see the woman who killed his wife was standing in his house every day smiling. His phone buzzed. Text from secure number. You're starting to see it now. Rowan's hands shook typing back. Who are you? The response came immediately. Long, detailed. Truth spilling out in paragraphs that made his vision narrow. Scarlett killed Nadia. She's Nadia's half-sister, illegitimate daughter their father never acknowledged. Different mothers. Scarlett grew up knowing she had a sister who got everything while she got nothing. Not money. Not the name. Not acknowledgement. She hated Nadia for having the life she wanted. When Nadia died, Scarlett became co-trustee. She controls the estate until the twins turn 18 or die. If they die, the trust dissolves. Money goes to Nadia's closest living relative. That's Scarlett. She's been poisoning them slowly, keeping them blind, dependent. When the time was right, she'd finish it. Make it look like medical complications. I couldn't let that happen. I failed Calder. I won't fail Ellie and Elia. Rowan's throat closed. He typed. Where are they? Safe house. 40 miles north of Bismarck. They're learning to see Rowan. For the first time, they're actually learning. Because I stopped giving them the poison drops. Why didn't you tell me? The response took longer this time. Would you have believed me? Rowan stared at the question. Knew the answer.
No.
He wouldn't have believed. Would have called her crazy. Would have had her arrested. Would have let Scarlett continue poisoning his daughters because trust was easier than truth. Back at the estate, Scarlett stood in Rowan's office staring at his computer. She'd installed remote monitoring software months ago. Standard security measure for household management. Or that's what she'd told herself. Really, it was insurance. She needed to know if anyone got close to the truth. Now the truth was spilling everywhere. She watched Rowan's search history populate in real time. Detective Reginald. Property records. Mabel Sterling malpractice case. Dr. Gideon Harkrow. Financial records. The archived security footage from 3 years ago showing her entering Nadia's bedroom. He knew. He'd found everything.
Her phone rang.
She answered, without checking caller ID. We have a problem. Quentin Darkridge's voice came through confused. What are you talking about? Wrong person. She'd meant to call someone else. Forget it. I'll handle it myself. Scarlett, what's going on? She hung up. Couldn't deal with the attorney's questions now. Quentin was too ethical. Too by the book. He'd ask for evidence and explanations. He'd insist on involving authorities. He'd ruin everything she'd built over 8 years. Her phone rang again.
Quentin.
She declined the call. He tried twice more. Then apparently gave up. Or decided to drive over. Either way, she was running out of time. Quentin sat in his car outside the law office staring at his phone. Scarlett had sounded wrong.
Panicked.
In 8 years, he'd never heard her panic. Something was happening. Something involving Rowan and the missing twins, and whatever problem she wouldn't explain. He started his car. 30 minutes to the Voslin estate. He'd get answers in person. Rowan pulled into a truck stop 20 miles from Bismarck. Called the number from the secure text. It rang 3 times before someone answered. Male voice. Familiar somehow. You found it. Not a question. Who are you? Calder Rowcroft. Nadia's brother. Calder Beaumont was my son. Rowan's hands went numb. The boy who died. The boy Mabel tried to save. Someone tampered with the surgical equipment. Made it look like malpractice. Destroyed her career. We've been investigating for 3 years. Building a case against Scarlett. You've been working with Mabel? She saved my son's vision before someone killed him. She spent 4 years trying to stop the same person from killing again. When she heard about your twins, about Nadia's daughters being kept blind, she knew it was Scarlett. Knew the pattern. She couldn't get evidence without getting inside your house. Without earning trust. Without making you see the truth yourself. Why not just tell me? Would you have believed her? The same question. The same answer Rowan couldn't avoid. What do you have? Financial records showing Scarlett paid Detective Reginald. Testimony from Dr. Harcrow about who really funded his practice. Pharmacist statements about the neurotoxin. Security footage you're holding. And Mabel's testimony about what she witnessed. Calder paused. We needed you to find it. Needed you to be the one who discovered the truth. Otherwise it looks like revenge. Like a doctor whose career was destroyed coming after a wealthy family. Now it's a father protecting his daughters. Now it's evidence you uncovered yourself. Now it holds up in court. Where are my daughters? Safe. With Mabel. 40 miles north. I'll send you the address. But first you need to go back home. Act normal. Tell Scarlett you want to show her security footage. Get her into your office. Federal agents are already en route. We'll handle the rest. The line went dead. Rowan drove back to the estate with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He parked. Walked inside like nothing was wrong. Found Scarlett in the kitchen coordinating with police search teams. She looked up when he entered. Concern painted across her features. Any news on the girls? Nothing yet. Rowan's voice stayed level. I'm so sorry, Rowan. I need to show you something in my office. Security footage I found. Scarlett's face flickered. Micro-expression of fear. Gone in half a second. Replaced with careful attention. Of course. They walked together down the hallway. Rowan's pulse hammered in his ears. Outside his office window, he could see unmarked cars pulling into the drive. Calder Rowcroft stepping out. 2 federal agents behind him. Mabel emerging from the back seat with small hands gripping hers. Ellie and Elia. His daughters. Alive. Safe. Learning to see. Rowan opened the office door. Held it for Scarlett. She entered. He closed it behind them. Turned the lock. She faced him. And for the first time in 3 years he saw her without the mask. The fake sympathy was gone. Her eyes were cold. Calculating. Predator eyes that had been watching him all along. You know, she said flatly. Not a question. A statement. Rowan didn't respond. Scarlett laughed. Sharp. Bitter. Nadia always was naive. She never suspected. Right up to the moment I pushed her. Rowan's fist clenched. Why? Scarlett leaned against his desk. Relaxed. Like confession was relief. Because she had everything I was denied. Our father gave her the world, and gave me nothing. Not even his name. When she died, I thought I'd finally have what should have been mine. But then those brats survived. Blind, useless little mistakes. I had to keep them that way. Keep them dependent. Until they weren't worth the cost of keeping alive. Rowan stepped toward her. You poisoned my daughters. Scarlett shrugged. Technically, I prevented their recovery. There's a difference. The office door opened. Federal agents entered with weapons drawn. Scarlett's face finally showed fear. The federal agents moved fast. One grabbed Scarlett's arm. Spun her around. Metal handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The sound was final. Permanent. Scarlett Chambers, you're under arrest for first-degree murder, attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The agent's voice was flat. Professional. You have the right to remain silent. Scarlett didn't struggle. Didn't protest. She turned her head toward Rowan as they pulled her toward the door. Her expression twisted into something ugly. They're still blind, Rowan. I made sure of that. Even if they recover, They'll never be normal. Never whole. You'll spend the rest of your life watching them struggle. Rowan's voice came out steady.
Cold.
They don't need to be normal.
They just need to be alive.
Scarlett laughed as they dragged her out. Sharp.
Bitter.
The sound echoed down the hallway long after she disappeared. Rowan collapsed into his desk chair. His hands shook. His entire body shook. 3 years. 3 years of living with his wife's murderer. 3 years of letting her poison his daughters under his own roof. 3 years of surveillance and control and paranoia aimed at everyone except the actual threat. He'd been watching screens while the danger made coffee in his kitchen. Administered medication with gentle hands. Smiled at him every morning. The office door opened again. Mabel entered first. Then 2 small figures behind her. Ellie and Elia. His daughters.
Alive.
Rowan's legs gave out. He felt at his knees on the hardwood floor Nadia had chosen. The twins ran to him. Not stumbling. Not hesitant. They moved with confidence he'd never seen before. Like they could see where they were going. I'm sorry. His voice broke. I'm so sorry. Ellie's small hands touched his face. Explored his features with fingers that knew him from touch, but were learning him from sight. Daddy, we can see shapes now. Miss Mabel taught us. Elia pressed against his side. The lights aren't scary anymore. They're pretty. Rowan pulled them both against his chest and wept. Not quiet tears. Body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep he'd kept locked for 3 years. All the grief he'd buried, for Nadia, for the daughters he thought he'd lost to darkness, for the years he'd wasted hiding behind cameras instead of living. It poured out. His daughters held him while he broke apart, while he finally let himself feel everything he'd been running from. An hour later, Rowan sat in the garden with Mabel. The twins played nearby on grass they could actually see. November cold bit through his jacket, but he didn't care. This was the first time he'd sat outside in months. The first time he'd been present instead of watching through windows. 4 years ago, I was treating Calder. Mabel's voice was quiet. Nadia's nephew. 6 years old. Optic nerve damage from birth trauma. The experimental procedure was working. His vision was improving. But the night before the final surgery, someone tampered with the equipment. I didn't catch it. He died on the table. I was blamed. Scarlett. Mabel nodded. Calder's medical expenses were draining Nadia's resources. Money Scarlett wanted. Money she thought should have been hers. She sabotaged the procedure. Destroyed my career. Got away with it. When Nadia got pregnant, Scarlett saw another opportunity. If the twins were born with problems, she could control everything. The money. The narrative. When they were diagnosed blind, she started the poison drops immediately. Convinced everyone it was necessary treatment. Rowan's jaw clenched. Why come work for me? Because Calder's father, your brother-in-law, never stopped investigating. He found the truth. Found me. We've been building a case for 3 years. But we needed proof she was actively harming your daughters. That required getting inside your home. Earning enough trust to stay long enough to document everything. You used my daughters as bait. Mabel met his eyes. I saved your daughters. If I told you sooner, you'd have fired me. Gone to Scarlett. She'd have killed them and disappeared. This was the only way. Rowan wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at being manipulated. But watching Ellie and Elia play in sunlight they could finally see, he couldn't find the anger. Just exhaustion. And relief. A car pulled up. Dr. Reese Aldridge from Mayo Clinic. Rowan had called him during the arrest. Begged for an emergency evaluation. The doctor examined both twins for 40 minutes. Tested their responses. Their perception. Their developing vision. Remarkable. Dr. Aldridge straightened. They're showing light perception, shadow differentiation, early shape recognition. I've never seen optic nerve hypoplasia reverse like this. Because it wasn't hypoplasia. Mabel's voice was steady. It was toxin-induced suppression. Once we stopped the poison and started vision therapy, their natural neural pathways began developing. How long have you been treating them? 6 weeks. Dr. Aldridge's eyebrows rose. 6 weeks? This level of improvement should have taken years. If it happened at all. Rowan finally understood. His daughters were never broken. They were being kept broken. Everything he'd believed, every specialist's verdict, every hopeless prognosis, was built on poison foundation. The 14 doctors hadn't been wrong about the diagnosis. They'd been wrong about the cause. Another car. Quentin Darkridge stormed up the driveway, looking furious. Scarlett tried to frame me. Told the agents I knew about the embezzlement. That I was complicit. I know. Rowan stood. I saw the evidence. You're clear. Quentin sat heavily on the garden bench. Exhausted. Nadia was my friend. I'll make sure Scarlett never sees daylight. I promise you that. He pulled out his tablet. Updates scrolled across the screen. Scarlett's assets frozen. Facing life without parole. Dr. Harkrow cooperating with authorities in exchange for reduced charges. The trust restructured with Scarlett removed. The twins' inheritance secured. Quentin looked up. They need their father. Not cameras. Not protocols.
You.
Night fell across the prairie. The house went quiet. Rowan stood outside the nursery door for a long moment. He hadn't entered this room in 3 years. Couldn't face what it represented. What he'd lost. The door was still painted with Nadia's wildflowers. Prairie blooms climbing up the frame. Her handprints visible in the brushstrokes. He pushed it open. Dust covered everything. The 3 cribs still arranged in their half-circle. Her rocking chair in the corner. The mobile of stars she'd hung herself. Her paintings on the walls showing the life she'd imagined for their daughters. Space and sky and freedom. Rowan sat in the rocking chair. Let himself remember. Nadia's laugh. Her hope. Her dreams. The way she'd painted this room while 8 months pregnant because she wanted their children to wake up to beauty. I failed you, he whispered to the empty room. I let fear win. I stopped fighting. A sound at the door. Ellie and Elias stood there. Mabel behind them. We want to sleep in here tonight, Ellie said. This room feels like mommy. Rowan's throat closed.
He couldn't speak.
Mabel stepped forward. Let me help you clean it. And for the first time in 3 years, the nursery Nadia built came back to life. They wiped dust from surfaces. Changed sheets on the cribs. Opened windows to let November air sweep out the staleness. The twins touched everything. Learning their mother through the room she'd made. Tomorrow they'd begin again. Tomorrow there'd be therapy and legal proceedings and the long work of healing. But tonight, in this room full of memory and hope, a broken family started putting itself back together. One small piece at a time. 3 months later, winter settled over North Dakota like a blanket. The kind of cold that bit through layers and turned breath to fog. But inside the Voslin estate, warmth had returned. Not just heat. Something deeper. The house was lived in now. Full of sound that wasn't surveillance equipment or empty rooms. Laughter. Music. Small feet running down hallways. Rowan no longer hid in his office. He sat at the kitchen table every morning eating breakfast with his daughters. Read to them before bed every night. Played in the snow when they begged to go outside. The cameras were still there, reduced to standard home security, but he didn't watch them anymore.
Didn't need to.
He was present. Ellie and Elias' progress was remarkable. Their light sensitivity improved daily. They could differentiate colors in high contrast now. Navigate familiar rooms without assistance. They were beginning to recognize faces through shape and shadow. Would they ever have perfect vision? Probably not. Dr. Aldridge had been clear about realistic expectations. But independence was achievable. Normal life was possible. That was more than anyone had promised 3 years ago. Mabel was still with them. Her role had changed. No longer just caregiver. She was officially their vision therapist now. Working with Dr. Aldridge on research. Publishing case studies. Her lawsuit against the medical board was pending, but license reinstatement looked likely. The evidence of sabotage was undeniable. Rowan had offered to fund her research indefinitely. Set up a foundation. Give her whatever resources she needed. She'd declined. I don't want your money. I want your daughters to thrive. But she'd accepted partnership. They were opening a vision therapy center in Bismarck. For children told they'd never see. For families told to give up. Rowan was backing the venture completely. Nadia would want this, he'd said. Mabel had smiled. She would. Calder Rowcroft visited in early December. Brought photographs of his son. The boy who died on Mabel's operating table. The nephew Nadia had loved. He showed the pictures to Ellie and Elia. Told them stories. Your mother visited him every week during treatment. She'd bring books. Read to him. She believed he'd recover. Calder's voice was soft. She would have fought for you the way Mabel did. She would never have accepted impossible. He looked at Rowan. You have a second chance. Don't waste it. They walked together to Nadia's grave on the property. Under a cottonwood tree she'd planted the year they bought the estate. Rowan hadn't visited in 2 years. Couldn't face the stone with her name. The dates that proved she was gone. But now he knelt in frozen grass and placed flowers. White roses. Her favorite. I see them now, he whispered. Really see them. I'm sorry it took so long. The nursery was the twins' bedroom now. Nadia's murals had been repainted, this time with Ellie and Elia's help. Messy fingerprints everywhere. Colors outside the lines. Perfect in its imperfection. The medical equipment was gone. Replaced with toys and books and art supplies. Photographs of Nadia covered the walls. Her smile watching over them while they slept. Rowan read to them here every night. Tonight it was a story about the northern lights. How they danced across winter sky in colors that seemed impossible. What did Mommy look like? Ellie asked suddenly. Rowan's throat tightened. He set the book down. She had dark hair. Like yours. And a warm smile that made everyone feel safe. She had eyes that saw the best in everyone. We're going to see her someday, Elia said. When our eyes work better. We're going to see her picture and know her face. You will. Rowan pulled him close. But she's already here. In this room. In you. Every time you're brave or kind or refuse to give up. That's her. That's your mother. Scarlett's trial had concluded last week. Life sentence without parole. Convicted on every charge. Dr. Harcrow had testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. The detective who'd covered up Nadia's murder was charged too. Justice served. But it didn't bring Nadia back. Didn't erase 3 years of poison. Rowan felt no satisfaction watching Scarlett led away in chains. Just relief that it was over. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. The tree stood in the living room decorated with lights that twinkled red and green and gold. Ellie and Elia could see them. Their favorite accomplishment. They'd spent an hour last night just staring at the colors. Learning what Christmas looked like instead of just felt like. Mabel joined them for breakfast. Quentin stopped by with gifts for the twins. Dr. Aldridge video called to check their progress and wished them happy holidays. The house was full.
Alive.
Rowan watched his daughters laugh and play and interact with people who cared about them. No cameras recording. Just his eyes. His presence. Mabel caught him watching. You're different now. I was dead inside. Rowan's voice was quiet. I didn't think I could come back from losing Nadia. But you did. Because they needed you to. Rowan looked at his daughters. I thought hope was dangerous. That believing meant risking more pain. Mabel smiled. Hope isn't the risk. Giving up is. Rowan spent 3 years watching through screens. 3 years waiting for the next betrayal. 3 years missing what was right in front of him. We all build walls. We all convince ourselves that protection means distance. But the people who need us most, they're not waiting for perfection. They're waiting for presence. If this story reminded you of something you've been avoiding, something you've been too afraid to hope for, maybe that's a sign. Maybe it's time to stop watching and start living. Because the life you save might not be someone else's. It might be your own. Ellie tugged Rowan's sleeve. Daddy, can we go outside? We want to see the snow and the light. Rowan bundled them in coats and scarves and mittens. They stepped onto the prairie together. North Dakota, winter sprawled endless and white. Sun reflecting off snow so bright it hurt to look at. Ellie squinted, hand shielding her eyes. It's so bright. Elia laughed. Everything sparkles, Rowan knelt between them. You're seeing the world, baby girls. The way your mommy wanted you to. They played in the snow, building lopsided snowmen with carrot noses, making snow angels with arms that swept wide. Rowan didn't watch from a window. He was there, in the cold, in the light, living. Mabel joined them, and together this unlikely family, built from tragedy, held together by stubborn hope, stood in the prairie snow.
Scarred.
Imperfect. Healing.
Alive.
Rowan looked up at the sky, said the words he should have said 3 years ago. Thank you. For Mabel who refused to give up. For his daughters who fought to see. For second chances. For hope. Because sometimes miracles don't look like magic. Sometimes they look like a woman who wouldn't stop believing, 2 little girls who kept trying, and a father who finally learned that the bravest thing he could do was let himself hope again. The camera above the front door captured it all. But this time Rowan wasn't watching the footage. He was living the moment. And that made all the difference. That if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to smash that subscribe button for more. Also, share your thoughts and let me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow's story is going to be just as epic, so don't miss out. Now, let's continue.